Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman. Today, I got a real treat for you. His name is Jamie Curreri, and he is the Director of Public Works for the City of Boulder City in wonderful Nevada. Jamie, say what's up there, everybody.
Yes, sir. What's up, everybody? Thank you, Joseph.
So, Boulder City, not to be mistaken with Boulder. It's a lot of big stuff happening in Boulder now with Coach Prime and all that. But we got our own superstar here. We got a superstar. His name is Jamie Curreri. And and I want to get into what you do at Boulder City. So let's start it off this way. You're Director of Public Works. Give us a random Tuesday for what Jamie is doing all day for Boulder City, City of Boulder City.
A random Tuesday. So usually engulfed with meetings, first and foremost. It depends upon if it's a council week or not. Council weeks makes for a busy first few days of trying to get through briefings and making sure everything's presented properly. Pretty much, I wish I could say that we sit down with staff and kind of direct them, but I am blessed with an amazing staff. From my city engineer, my public works superintendent, project manager, their staff, they pretty much take care of things as they should, and they're very good at what they do. But yeah, if I was to talk about a Tuesday, it would probably be a lot of meetings.
Okay.
With contractors, engineers, trying to see where we are in certain projects, because we have our scope of projects ranges from water services to pavement maintenance to we had shade structures built. There's a lot of, for a small city, there's a lot of projects going on.
And do you proactively, intentionally put these meetings before Monday? Like, let's say I say, hey, Jamie, let's have a meeting. When are you free? Are you telling me Monday only? Or why don't you spread them out throughout the week?
No, it's pretty much as my schedule permits. I try not to book anything Monday mornings because, you're coming in off of a 3-day weekend, because we do 4-10s here. So you come in from not being in work on Thursday, and you got to try to catch up, look where you're at. I look at all the stickies around my computer to make sure I'm up to par on what I left off with. And but yeah, so I try not to schedule too much on a Monday morning.
Sure. Good stuff. The next question I always have to ask is, let's talk about how you got into public works. I kind of glanced through your history, Air Force, and then you had a couple of mechanics jobs, and then it looks like you kind of worked your way up into being a public works director. So give us, I guess, a brief history of Jamie, how you got into the industry, and then what got you into it.
Sure. Yeah, I was ever since I was a kid, I was always by my father's side doing some kind of mechanic stuff. So when I got out of high school, in high school I was an athlete. I wish I could say I was a honor roll student, but I wasn't. I'm a hands to brain kind of a guy. So when I got out, I went into the military, to the United States Air Force, where I was an aerospace ground equipment mechanic. I did that for about 6 years, and then I got out, and I got hired on as a German crane technician for a crane company up in Kingston, New York. And then I had an opportunity to work with one of the best in the crane industry, and he actually saw some things within me that I didn't even know I had. Definitely one of my biggest mentors. I worked with him, Mark Krejci, for 12 years, traveling all over the world, fixing German cranes and inspecting and teaching people how to run them. And so it was quite a job. But what that did is that took me down many avenues. There was when 9/11 happened. I spent the first 6 months of 9/11 actually working down there, being the German crane resident mechanic. So we did a lot of work down there. Yeah, and then I also went over to the Pentagon, had to work on some of the cranes over there as well. But that really gave me a broad scope on a lot of things, dealing with humans, human nature, troubleshooting things from mechanics to people to how to get, the best place to eat, when you're flying into the middle of Iowa, But then I went on after that. The housing market went and took a hit, and that really affected the crane industry. And I had to start seeking employment in other places because the place where I worked, it was just me and my boss, and he took a big hit. So I actually had a friend of mine who was a water operator in Pennsylvania, and he was getting ready to move on to somewhere else. So he had told me about it, and the 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 skill set needed to be a hydraulic mechanic, kind of translates into water. So I looked into it and I applied for the job, and I wound up getting it. And moving down the path there, I went and got my water operator's license, ran the whole water operation for the town of Matamoros, and then I had an opportunity to move up with being hired on by one of the largest privately owned communities in the Northeast as their lead water operator and supervisor. I went into there and realized that if I really wanted to move up, I had to focus and get my degree. So once I actually focused, I got my degree as in business management, and then from there, I started having opportunities open up for me, and one of them was to move up in that current role in that same operation, Hemlock Farms, as their next director of public works, and that's really how I got started into it. And then it's
Okay.
another story on how I actually became the public works director of the City of Boulder City.
Okay. All right. I like it. So answer this for me. What's easier to troubleshoot, a human or a German crane?
Human.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, by far, especially with today's technology, there's a lot going on. I mean, once you understand, actually, they're both one and the same. When you understand the basics of both, you can really troubleshoot anything.
Sure. Sure. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So you from being a mechanic to being a public works director and that's kind of the first time I've heard of that. It sounds like it's a small community. It's not necessarily a city, correct?
It's the size of a city. It's one
Okay.
of those gated communities, private communities in the Northeast. There was 10,000 citizens there. It was 80 miles of road, two-way road, and about right around 80 miles of piping for water. We had our own security, fire, EMS, rec department,
Wow.
4 lakes. So yeah, it was pretty big.
What are some similarities and differences to being in a place like that to where you're at today at Boulder City?
So the similarities are they're both kind of rec communities. You know, Boulder City is it really is a tourist attraction. We have on the regular anywhere between I've seen numbers fluctuate, but 14 to 16,000 people full time, and then you have tourists like we had Art in the Park here a couple weeks ago, and I think that they said it was like 20, 30,000 people that came. In a small city, Boulder City, that's a lot of people. And same thing up there. It was a seasonal community where you would have influxes during the summer. You'd have your winter crowd, you'd have your summer crowd, but same mentality, same ideal, same things that they're looking for.
Okay. And Lake Mead, is that Boulder City?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
kind of like Boulder City proper.
Okay. And then Hoover Dam also, correct?
Yeah, Hoover Dam
So
is literally 5 minutes from my office.
cool, cool. So give the listeners kind of a brief like a rundown of what Boulder City's like. You're just outside of Vegas. I think on our pre-call you said that like you're so close to Las Vegas, but you have the little mountain range in between where you don't have to see the city lights and the light pollution at night. So tell us about Boulder City and kind of its uniqueness.
Yeah, Boulder City is when I first came here, I was in awe of how beautiful it is. How when you come, through the mountains, it's called the River Mountain Range. River Mountain Range. I'm still learning all the area. But once you come through there from Las Vegas and Henderson, you're kind of tucked away. You look down into the El Dorado Valley, which is a dry lake bed, and then you have all the mountains surrounding you, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And you don't realize how quaint it is till you start driving in. And then you have old historic Boulder City, which is when you go into there, um, it really is absolutely gorgeous. You feel like you're back in time. They everything that they've done over the years is tried to maintain that 1930s kind of feel to it. You know, when Hoover Dam was built, from the writing is that same Broadway style writing from that era. Um, and when you go in and you start talking to people, everybody's very friendly. Um, from a guy from New York, your first reaction is like, "Oh, you're too friendly," you know. But they're actually not. They're very genuine people. And then, you know, the best part, the thing I love most about Boulder City is you are here. It's quiet. When I go out on my balcony, it's dead quiet. And then just 15 minutes away is Henderson, Las Vegas, everything you want to do. You know, and like my wife and I, when we want to have a nice night out, we go into Henderson or Las Vegas, get a really good meal, see a really great show, and then we're home back in bed by 10 o'clock.
Love it, man. It's some beauty to being able to have that access, but not be inundated by it. You know,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
And
So
coming from the Northeast where everything is like right on top of you, it's a completely different world.
sure, sure. And talk about Hoover Dam. I'm not sure exactly what your involvement is with it, or if there's anything like what's the I guess the main questions you get in regards to Hoover Dam.
So with Hoover Dam, it's run by the Bureau of Reclamation, so we don't really have anything to do with it. We kind of offer services like our fire department, our police department will help if there's certain things that they request there. If there's a fire there, we always try to back up. But from a public works end of things, we don't really have anything to do with Hoover Dam. We're included in the conversations about, you know, you hear about the water shortage and you know, the Colorado River and all that. We're included in the conversation, but not really a decision making factor.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay, so you're the director of public works now. Now you're the head honcho. It sounds like you've been doing it for some years. Let's say you're mentoring a youngster. It's like, Jamie, like what skill set should I pick up to be good at what you're doing today? What would that skill set be?
Patience. Learn how to follow.
Why patience?
Because patience first and foremost because you deal with a variety of people. You deal with the nicest people you ever met to the orneriest people you'll ever meet. You know, you're dealing with administrative people, and you're dealing with, now this is from a work end, you're dealing with administrative and you're dealing with blue collar, you know, so it's a different makeup. You know, people take different paths, they go down different, they have different experiences. The makeup is mostly different. So you have to be very versatile with your ability to listen, be patient. But I think first and foremost, the thing I always try to do is you got to be able to follow. You know, if you want, when you have a staff, I think the hardest thing that leaders grasp is to really trust the staff you have, right? They were hired, whether I hired them or not, they were hired because somebody saw something in them that was good in the position they were filling. So what I do, like when I first took over here, I trust first. I'm a very trusting person. I don't have you earn the trust. I give you my trust. And then I saw this one thing years ago. I think it was Simon Sinek that actually had a piece of paper, and he said, you know, if you trust first, let people tear that, you know, little piece off. They're wearing down your trust, right? If you are, as a leader, if you believe in the people or trust in the people that you've hired to do the job, you're pleasantly surprised that they're actually very good at what they do. Most of them are. You know, some of them, you know, they may need some extra tools to kind of, you know, get things moving. But I have yet to be let down on the majority of staff that I've just opened up to trusting first.
Yeah, that's a good analogy too. With your blue collar background and also, you know, I administrative background, does that kind of help you navigate both sides and both conversations and both, I guess, ways of getting points across?
Oh, sure. I have an understanding of, I've been in a trench at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's -2 degrees out, and there's a water main leak, and you got to get it fixed. That's a eye-opening experience when you're standing there and you're like, oh, I'm the one who's got to fix this. If I don't fix it, it doesn't get fixed. You know. So when you're in a trench like that, and you go through things with your core group of employees that are with you, you learn a lot of things. You know, first and foremost, I think people really want to be good, right? People want to do a good job. They want to impress their boss for the most part. Um, you have to allow them to do that. And in order to do that, you have to understand where they are, right? Where they've been, where they come from. Um, and knowing that when you're in that hole, and I use this experience because it's very vivid. When you're in that hole and it's freezing out, your hands are cold, your mustache has ice on it, and there's water flowing, and your boots are starting to get wet, but you got to get this fixed. Everybody, you can sit there and complain all you want, but the bottom line is we're here to do a job. We're hired to do a job. Sometimes, I call it, for lack of a better term, I call it a poop sandwich. Um, sometimes you just got to eat it. It's one of those
Yeah.
times. And in public works, you do have the ability for the freedom to kind of do your day, right? Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not so great, and you have to really, as a leader of a public works crew, I have to understand that those great times are when we promote, when we throw accolades around, and have the ability to have a lunch, with someone, or give up the afternoon and do cornhole and burgers, because that's important to get that 2 o'clock in the morning phone call answered, and that's where being the blue collar really comes into play.
That's a really great point because I've seen a lot of startup companies. I would say they have too much cornhole, too many company barbecues, like too much of that, and nobody gets any work done. Or else it's kind of like, I would say almost a joke. So how do you know, like, when to kind of shut that off, or when to, what's that balance of making sure people are having fun and that they feel heard and loved versus like, hey, we got to get in that trench. I know it's 2 a.m., but we got to get in that trench.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's honesty of the feelings, right? It's I would love to be everybody's friend, and I really do strive to try to be, but I don't need to be, and I know that sounds a little harsh, but you have to understand we're here to do a job, right? There are some good parts of it. There's some bad parts. I think if you keep, if I need someone to do something for me in the middle of their lunch, right? I got to be honest with them. Hey, I need this service to be, taken care of immediately. Go ahead and take care of that, and don't worry about it. You'll come back, you'll get your lunch, or you try to identify those moments of where you're actually taking something from someone and give it back, right? But it's also reciprocal. When you have the good times and we're having those barbecues and things like that, you also have to be a grown up and say to yourself, okay, this is one of those times where, that was fun, but now I got to get to work. But one of my main thing is I try to be as honest. I've told my kids since they were little, I will tell you the truth as I know it, and I will be as honest as I can be. Those things go a long way. And I think the honesty is important for both ends. It's important for them to hear my honesty, and it's important for me to receive honesty from them. Because when we have that honest, open relationship, that's when you can say almost anything. I'm very fortunate right now in the role I'm at with the staff that I have, the senior staff that I have. They are so professional when we're at work, and then after work, we can go have something to eat, and we're back to Jamie and friends. And it's a very unique situation. I've been through a lot of areas where I thought that I could have that, and you just can't. So you have to understand that limit as well.
Sure. How did you, I wouldn't say cultivate that type of atmosphere, but Boulder City, it's kind of on the outskirts of the, I guess, the Las Vegas Valley there. Talent, I'm sure it's short, as most cities tell me. They say, hey, it's so hard finding good guys, it's so hard finding good operators, clerical, whatever. Like most cities are understaffed. So how did you find talent? How do you cultivate it? And then also, I'm sure you have a generation that's going to retire in the near future here.
Yeah.
And then what are you going to do to kind of backfill that and make sure there's no drop off with production?
Uh, First and foremost, I believe in the human part of the job. I don't, the job to me, this is, some people aren't going to understand this unless you actually live it, but the job to me is second. The human factor is first. So when somebody, if I'm recruiting someone or somebody wants to come work for me, the first thing I tell them is I actually care about them. Care about them, I care about their family. It's important to me that they understand that when they come to work for me or the City of Boulder City, that their family is important. Their job is important. Their input is important. The job comes second. I can train most people a skill, right? I can train most people on how to do a job, but one thing I can't train is a good human. I can't train someone who doesn't have solid morals. There's things that I look for when I'm interviewing people that indicate, that give those little green lights on this is someone with structure, right? So to answer your question, my first thing is the human end of it. I deliver. I don't sit there and BS. I just tell them how it is, and I'm upfront and honest. And I think they see that from the get go. And in the Vegas Valley, everybody's worked for everybody. You know, people
Really?
swap.
Wow.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's commonplace, and because you're in this bowl, and everybody. That's one thing that really blew my mind when I first got here was how small the engineering industry is here in this valley. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody has worked for everybody. But the other end of it is not one person that I've met has not helped me, has not
Wow.
been willing to get me going on something. Coming here to Nevada, the biggest obstacle for me, or the biggest, not obstacle, um, thing I needed to learn was NRS, Nevada State, Nevada Revised Statutes. It was, there's so many different NRS codes that you have to go through and learn, and it guides everything that you do. And coming from a private community where it's a lot more lenient to something so strict, that was probably the biggest thing I had to learn here.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of red tape to go through, a lot of cover your butt in this certain region,
Oh
huh?
yeah, and actually it's fantastic because it really does. It's transparent. You don't have a choice but to be transparent.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so it's story time. I need a
Sure.
story from Jamie on when something went wrong under your watch, what you did to fix it, and then what lessons you learned from it to apply to your future career.
Well, I have one that's a little embarrassing, but it's a good one, and it was definitely um, a life lesson for me moving forward as a leader or someone who really wanted to run a department. And it was in the first few months of me taking over as a water technician, um, we were doing a hydrant flush. We were cleaning the water system out, and it was just me at the time. So I recruited the help of some firemen, and thinking that they knew what they were doing because I was just learning all these processes. I kind of let them go, and I didn't have a plan in place on how to actually flush the system or flush it properly. I still didn't learn that yet. So we're on the phone talking to each other. I got 5 or 6 different groups at all these different hydrants, and this was a small water system. And they were opening up 10-inch pipes, 12-inch pipes at the same time. And I'm talking, you got 8-inch pipes open, 6-inch pipes, 12-inch, 10-inch, The next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call from down the distribution system that people are getting no water. There's no water. So what we did was we ran the tanks dry, and I was mortified. I was so scared, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't, it was so I had to call DEP, who was my governing agent or body for my water operator's license there, which I didn't even have yet. Um, I called them and asked them what to do. They were like, "Seriously, you ran the town out of water?" And I was so embarrassed, and I just had to, again, I had to come clean. It's going to be what it's going to be. I'm the only one here, so it's my watch. So I had to do what I had to do. Had to issue boiler advisories, and it was 4th of July weekend. And
No.
oh yeah, and the town was not happy with me, and I had to own it, and so what I wound up doing, what I learned from that was you can trust, but you still have to follow up. Make sure that the people that you assign the tasks are doing the tasks. You don't have to, be over their shoulder, but you got to be clear, right, with the objective. So I try to now. My learn from that is clear objectives, instructions, making sure that everybody understands. One of the things I always say is, I know this is redundant, but I got to ask, I got to hear myself say it so that I hear your answer and then I'm good, But that was definitely my biggest faux pas in
Gosh,
the
that's
industry.
first off, thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah.
A lot of people are too embarrassed to share stuff like that, but thank you for that. And it shows that, like, look at you, you're still here. You
Oh
still,
yeah.
you're still upright. You might not have your hair left like me, but you're still here. Oh, and another thing,
Everything's a
the whole
positive, man.
sure, sure. One thing, the whole trust but verify, like you say, I'm better about that because I have a 2-year old now, and
Yeah.
so now when I give an instruction, even if I said it 10 minutes ago, I have to say I just wanted to say it again. Like I use a caveat, like I just got to hear myself say it, or maybe you heard this before, or like you're smarter than me. Like here's what I have to say,
Yeah.
and so it allows me to be able to verify that they got it, and then we can move forward because I don't want to assume that you have it and you don't.
You're hitting on probably the biggest thing that I carry with me was I have 2 children, no longer children, they're men now, 30 and 26 years old. Um, but they were my biggest teachers on how to become a leader, without a doubt. Because although you look at people I lead now, right, the younger group coming up, they want to don't tell me what to do, that kind of an attitude. As a child, your child, my wife taught me this early on as well with our young ones. Um, Children act like they hate structure, right? They don't want it. Leave me alone. I can do it. You'll see when they get to the teenage years, it's a battle, but it has to be, right? It has to be because your job as their dad is to make sure that you give them the tools to be successful when you're not around, right? When it comes down to structure, you have to stick with structure. Your children don't want it, but they need it, and they don't know they need it. Same with staff. They need structure. They want to be able to run willy nilly, but it's our job to make sure that we give them that structure, keep them within that structure, and move them forward. They're happier for it. Your children grow up better for it. You know that when they walk out the house, they may make a stupid choice, but they'll go back and go, "Dad, he was right." Same thing. You don't have to tell me we're right, but I know that I'm not going to waver in what I am. So when it comes to the structure of my children, there's clear boundaries, and they know how to stay inside of that. So that's one of the things, with staff itself. My biggest thing I fall back on is the way that I actually raise my children.
Gosh, that's so good. I heard an analogy, and this guy said he told everybody in the classroom to draw a picture. And he said, just start drawing. And then, like he said, nope, you're doing it wrong. Nope, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. Like after the third, you're doing it wrong. They're like, we know, like, what do you want from us? And I'm, kind of the same way. Like when I was an employee, like if I don't know what my numbers are to hit, like I'm going crazy. Like, am I doing good? Am I doing bad? Like, what's the like? Should I be doing more? Should I be doing less? Like, are you happy with me? Like that drives the person nuts. I'd
Oh
rather
yeah.
like not miss. I'd rather not make the mark than just not know if I'm not making the mark.
You
So
know, on
yeah,
that same thing, there's a thing that I've seen before, and I forget where I saw it, but you can give someone a piece of paper and say, give me the different ways of how to get the sum of nine, right? There's how many different ways of doing it, right? So your direction is, I need the sum of nine. How you get there, it's up to you, right? Show me that you can do it, and you'll find so many different ways to get the number nine at the
mm,
end. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
there's so many different little tricks like that to understanding leadership and how to get people kind of geared towards the same thing. You're not going to have the same methods and means or means and methods, but you're going to have the same result.
Sure, sure. And then everybody responds different. I'm sure you have two sons. I have a brother, and we learn and we're disciplined different than each other. There's one way you motivate one, and there's probably another way you motivate the other. And like, they probably both got to the same similar destination.
So that's a perfect example. So my oldest, right? He uh, he was an artist in school. Played every instrument under the sun. Drew. He was goth. Black hair, black shirt, black hat, but black everything, right? And then there's my youngest, who was an athlete, a wrestler. Always with kind of the in crowd. My oldest was not really with the in crowd. He hung away from everybody, not really social. Where my youngest was very social. You know, when so my oldest, when he got out of high school, he went right into the military. Right, completely blew our mind. We thought he would, waste hundreds of thousands of dollars going to these art schools and all this, and I'm not
Yeah, yeah.
that, and
Standard millennial, yeah.
yeah. And then our youngest actually went to college for wrestling, and they both went into the Navy. And now at 30, my oldest, who is the artist, is a federal agent, and my youngest is a naval aviator. So the
Wow.
path kind of went the
Yeah,
same, but their journey was much different. You know, and
yeah.
the one I thought was going to go to college didn't. The one I thought would kind of be at home wound up going to college, and but the same trajectory or different trajectory, same goal at the end, which was
Wow.
quite funny.
And I'm sure you couldn't have wrote that book before you lived that experience. Like, there's no way you
Yeah,
could have predicted that.
yeah. And there again, you got to let them have onus on their own life as well. Once you start to see that, okay, I've said this enough, I need to leave it alone and let them figure it out for themselves now. It's that father thing. When the kid comes running and he falls, you're gonna go safe, or you're gonna go When you go safe, they look at you and go ha ha, and
Yeah,
then
that
they're
wasn't that
moving on.
bad. Yeah,
But when you go
yeah,
then you make it
yeah,
worse, and you
yeah,
perseverate
yeah.
on it. Then it just that's what you're developing.
Gosh, man, we could talk about parenting all day. I'm still
Oh
learning. I got a 2-year-old and I got a 5-month-old. It's just, yeah, I'm in it, man. But so speaking of your time in the industry and how you get better and better, I want to know what Jamie's personal and professional development regimen is like. What do you do intentionally and proactively to keep showing up better and better year after year?
So intentionally is easy. Um, I tell people I love them. I I'm not scared to hug somebody. I think the human end of it really is what comes into play. I think one of the things we lack as a society right now is being able to look at someone and just say, "Hey, man, I'm proud of you. That was fantastic." Even if it wasn't necessarily fantastic, but they gave it their all. They put everything they had into it. Why not compliment that, right? Not why not make them feel good? We've turned into this society where we're inward now. I don't like that. I like Joseph, man. You're doing a fantastic job in this interview, dude. You're killing it, right? How does that make you feel? Makes you feel
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
Why not
yeah.
promote that? So,
Mm,
and to be intentional is to be complimentary. Important to in my understanding of why someone isn't happy, why someone is happy. I'm very intentional when it comes to compliments. What was the other
you
part
know,
portion of the question?
um, like your personal and professional development. You read books, you go on to seminars, and stuff like that.
So I am not a book reader, right? I read to learn. I don't read to grow. I grow from my years of understanding. My brother is a recovering alcoholic, and it I learned so much from him in his recovery on how to actually understand people and what people want first. That's where I learned. I learned from talking to people and different situations. How do I come out of a situation better? You know, the other thing that I keep in mind is, and I said this earlier, nothing to me is a negative. Everything is a positive, and I truly, in my heart, believe that. I think that if I messed up on something, I didn't mess it up. And you've heard this before. I found a way not to do it. I found a way not to do it. One of my biggest um, mentors in my life was actually one of my old bosses that was horrible at it. And I love the guy, but he just was not a leader. And I saw so many ways to not do something that when I got into the position, I knew exactly how I wanted to do the opposite.
Sure. Let's talk more about this. I guess the empathetic side of you. You said the word love and then hugs and like giving. I would say compliments. Normally in our industry, like a blue collar industry. I mean, you're a former crane mechanic. Like guys are usually busting each other's balls. They're spitting, chewing, and cussing and stuff like
Yeah,
that. And nobody really like said I love you or like even though I'm proud of you. That like kind of puts people like at guard.
yeah.
Where was that a mindset switch for you? Where did you develop that from?
So I grew up, my father's full blooded Italian, and my mother, she's Polish and a mixture of other things. But I grew up in a very hug, touch, kiss. It was I kiss my uncles, my cousins, my brothers. Every time I see them, I kiss them. I kiss my kids when I see them. We grew up in a very loving environment like that. Um, so that's really my drive. When we do things, even though we say we want to do things unselfish, we want to do things. We, when we do something, it's always a selfish act because it gives back to us, right? I don't do something that specifically gives me nothing. That's not true. My grandmother used to say, if you want to pray, go into the closet and pray anonymously, right? So you're not showing everybody you're praying, so you don't get praised for it. It's about you and God, right? It's still a selfish thing because you're praying uh, because you want to make sure that you have a place in heaven, right? So you're
Uh,
trying to. So everything we do is kind of selfish in a way. It's my need, you know. Um, but when it comes to everything that I grew up with was wrapped around that emotion, feelings, all that. So when I need something from someone, it's usually emotion driven. I give them a hug or, I pat them on the back, man. That is a fantastic job. There was one of my ex employees, gruff dude, kind of along the lines of what you're saying, very grumpy. He'd come in the morning just grumpy, right? When I first got my job as the water supervisor, he came in and he complained about me parking in his spot, right? And I looked at him, I was like, "Whoa, you're a grumpy fella." And he said a couple words to me, and then he walked out. I followed him out. And I said, hey, I'm going to get a hug from you one day. And that's a true story. And he goes, said a couple choice words to me. Do you know, when I left there 7 years later, he would come into my office and go, what, no hug?
Yeah, yeah.
Again, it's because we're human,
Yeah.
right? We are blessed. Joseph, I am blessed to be on this rock with you in the same moment, having this conversation when it is millions and millions of years that things have been on and off this earth. For us to be sharing this in the same time and moment is incredible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why waste it on hate and all that other stuff? I
Yeah.
don't believe in any of that. And again, it's not a an action that, so somebody cuts me off. First thing I want to do is fly off the handle. You know, so it's an action I have to always work on. I work on it daily. My first thing is always to drive to anger, you know, or something like that. When something like that happens, I have to go, maybe they're in a rush. Maybe they need to get over faster for some reason. You know, probably wrong, but you know, I still try to, you know, be a positive. I, I have to be positive for myself. I can't go into a negative spot.
Yeah. Gosh, it's so good putting that in perspective. Out of the X amount of thousands of years on this earth, the billions of people that have been on this earth, you and I are talking right now. Like, it's
Exactly,
crazy.
exactly. And we, you know, a couple weeks ago we didn't even know each other,
Yeah,
and here
yeah.
we are having a great conversation.
Gosh, love it, man. Love it. All right. What would you say is the biggest misconception about your position? Let's say I asked your 30-year-old son, what does your dad do for the city of Boulder City? Like, what value does he provide? What would he get totally wrong in answering that question?
Oh, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is what people don't think is they don't think we do our research. People think that you know, we just kind of do projects willy nilly for the most part. You know, I would say the biggest misunderstanding is research. We don't listen to community, and that's one thing I think I would definitely love to change. You know, and we try to change that through transparency and all that. You know, outreach programs. You know, if we have a project that we're looking into, we kind of reach out to the public, let them have some input on it. Um, we actually had a project not too long ago that I had to kind of squash because we needed to reallocate the funding. But when we put it out for the outreach, the feedback we got was people were saying that same thing. You know, we really could use the funding somewhere else. I had a lady call me on that exact project, and she said she's very aggressively. She was like, "Why are we doing this? We need to spend the money somewhere else." And I said to her, "You're right. You're right." And I am in the process, which is what the public didn't see at the time, of reanalyzing, you know, the wants and needs of that stuff. So I wound up squashing that and reallocating the funds for other things that we need. She was like, "Well, thank you," you know, because right away they jumped. You know, it's today's environment, right? Everybody
Yeah.
is, you know, the government is always down to get us. They hate us. You know, and then you realize I'm the same guy right next to you at the restaurant. You know, that's, you know, making decisions for our infrastructure here. You know, so I think my biggest thing would probably be the research and that we don't listen to the community.
Sure, sure. Well, speaking of putting a message out to the community, my billboard question. So if Jamie's commissioner put up a billboard and this billboard is in the most trafficked area of Boulder City, what ask of your community in regards to public works and to put on this billboard?
Be patient.
Okay. Back to
Be
patience. Yeah.
patient. You know, project has a life cycle, right? Any project. Um, Putting in a toilet is something you can do in a couple hours, right? Reconstructing 5 miles of road is not something that you can do in a couple hours. You know, there's a whole process with the from funding to design, concepts, the whole life cycle from cradle to grave of a project really depends upon the project. People think that because the project is budgeted in 2023, you get it done in 2023. Not necessarily true. The project may not get done till 2026 or 2025, depending upon how huge the project is, or in the design phases, how many red lines are you doing? How many times you got to look at the design and say, nah, we need to tweak this or tweak that. There's back and forth between consultants, engineers, contractors. So there's a lot that goes into play. I would absolutely say it's definitely to be patient and uh, try to understand a little better of the life cycles of projects.
Sure, sure. I agree with that. Let's say for the guys, let's say you could speak on behalf of the operators out there in the streets right now. They got their yellow vests on, they got the hard hats and work boots on. What would be the most impactful or the best pat on the back, the best thank you that a city member could give to a public works operator?
Thank you. I mean,
Fair.
it's
Fair.
straightforward. You go from the guy who's putting his, and I know some people don't see it this way, but literally putting his life on the line out there on the highway with cars buzzing by. Our first thing, like, let's go back to what I was saying before. Our first nature is to be aggressive. Why the heck are they doing this during this time of day? There's traffic. They understand there's a reason why we do what we do, right? It's not always convenient, and our guys take the brunt of the residents' anger. We definitely get a lot more anger related comments than we do positive, but we do get positive ones. So mine would say, I would say thank you would absolutely be it.
Okay. Okay. Appreciate that. Always like to leave a space on the show for you to thank mentors that you had along your journey. Then also give a word of, I guess, inspiration and motivation to your nationwide public works director counterparts.
Sure. Mentors, that's it's pretty easy. There's a bunch. I try to learn from everything and everyone every day. I learn from the moment I get up to the moment I go to sleep. There was one of my supervisors in the military said, if you didn't learn something in a day, the day was wasted. So I always try to learn from actions, how somebody reacts to me, how I react to them, because most of our communication is body. It's not really verbal. So I think if I had a word or something to, honestly, my biggest mentor is definitely my wife and my children, without question. It's my wife. She is an amazing individual. We talked about before, my children, from the day they were born, if I really wanted to establish a relationship with them, I was the one who had to grow, right? Because they're young. They don't know any different. When you look at your child at 2 years old, you're like, how did he know not to do it? Is it a son or a daughter? I lost you. There you are. I lost you for a second.
I have a 2-month-old or a 5-month-old son and a 2-year-old daughter.
There you go. So you look at your 2-year-old daughter and she does something and you're like, how do you not know? And then you realize, oh, I haven't taught her yet. Yeah. So I had to learn from things that my kids were doing. And if I needed them to change or grow or adapt, it was me that had to. So I would definitely say my wife and my children are my biggest mentors. But I definitely try to learn every day from somebody. And if I had words of advice for public works directors around the country, stay calm. Stay calm. It's a tough position we have. From people saying we don't do anything to people saying, we're randomly spending their money, to answering those phone calls where everybody's yelling and screaming. Definitely try to stay calm. lead from example.
Okay. Okay. I like it. All right. So if I'm coming to Boulder City, I
Mm-hmm.
text you ahead of time. Like,
Yep.
Jamie, where can we go to get the best burger in Boulder City? Where are we going?
So if we're going burgers, I would have to go to, bear with me, I have to go to Beer Zombies and the taco truck that doesn't make tacos anymore. They do burgers and fries. They have the best smash burgers around, without a doubt. But with that being said, there are so many good places to get a burger here. But that's I'm just a fan of a food truck making some burgers for me. You know, that goes back to my old days of fixing cranes and cities and everything. When I needed to get something to eat, I would just stop by a food truck and grab something.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. All right. All right. Well, Jamie, thank you for hopping on the podcast with us. To all the listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. Share this episode with somebody who you think needs to hear it. Jamie, any final words before we get out of here?
Just thank you. I appreciate your time, Joseph. I really do. And everybody out there for listening. Thank you so much.
For sure. For sure. All right. Well, this has been the Public Works Podcast, and thank you for tuning in.